Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Health and Wealth Podcast with your hosts, Tim and Carter.
What's trending, Enrichers? Carter Wilcoxson, founder of CSI Financial Group here, with my co-host and former wealth advisor, Tim James, founder of
ChemicalFreeBody.com and your new health advisor. This is the show where we reveal the connection between physical and financial abundance.
Hey, welcome back, Enrichers. Carter Wilcoxson coming to you from the Health and Wealth Podcast Show. I want to thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast Show. Today, I'm very excited about introducing you and hearing the backstory of one of our close vendor partners that we have that we'll get a little bit more in depth, I'm sure, a little bit later on. But as is normal, I am joined today by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Ben, coming in from Southern Cali. Dr. Ben, how are you doing, bud?
Doing great. So excited to have our guest here today and another phenomenal podcast ready to come.
Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. So without any delay, Enrichers, I want to go ahead and bring in from Northern California, from Sacramento area, unless he's out of town. I don't think he is.
No, not traveling today.
Yeah, Geoffrey Wallace of Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. Jeffrey, how are you, buddy?
I am fantastic, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity. This will be my first time on the show with you.
Yeah, I know it. It's pretty cool. And I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about this, but, this is more about, your journey, how you got into where you're at today and everything. And the Enrichers are really excited about hearing, each one of our guest story so they can, glean some of that information and maybe they can steal some of it and use it in their own practice. But with all that being said, I'm sure we will get into maybe the second segment, how the two of us became interconnected, if you will. So without any further delay, Geoffrey Wallace, let's go back in the way machine to whenever you first decided you're going to get into the quote unquote financial services arena. How did, some of that journey start for you, like influences and things of that nature?
Yeah, great question. So I would say the biggest move for me was moving from Arizona to California back in 2000. I was fortunate to connect with some gentlemen that became mentors and friends to this day with Countrywide Home Loans. And I relocated from Arizona out to Pleasanton, California, and began managing a branch there in Pleasanton. Then that transferred into a stint at Wells Fargo. And it was at Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. This is 2001. My boss at the time came to me and said, hey, we've got this small group of people that focus on reverse mortgages. No one really wants to run that department. It's just kind of out there, does its thing. Are you interested in managing that? And at that time, I looked at the guidelines for it, and I was just blown away by the product and the features and the benefits and the protections, and also, the need that it placed. And so I kind of dug my heels into that, and I took it over. And then from there, it became, I would say it aligned my spirit in terms of some past histories, family histories that we can talk about, along with kind of my passion for finance. And so from there, that kind of marriage was born.
Wow. So, let's go ahead. I mean,
unpack it all.
Yeah, unpack it all, baby. Let's go.
Hold it. You hooked me up to some, what is the Trusirium sodium benzethol or something like that? Okay. All right. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So for me, going back, my grandfather and my grandmother, who were very influential in my life. My grandmother was diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's. And, this was back before it was really the household common thing and as perverse as it is within, society today. And the effects of how devastating that is for a family, not only emotionally as you watch that person wither away and become farther disconnected, but also the financial toll that it plays. And my grandfather, who was a very proud man and had amassed a decent amount of wealth, you're not prepared for taking care of someone for that long of a duration. And then the cost associated with transferring from in-home care into a facility because, in-home care can no longer meet the needs was just financially devastating to my grandfather. And so I watched the toll that played on him, along with losing, his wife of, 60 years and my grandmother. It made a profound impact on me. And so when I read through the guidelines of what a reverse mortgage does, again, it aligned with my emotional heartstrings about creating different solutions. I would say that, back then, the product was really used as kind of a last resort strategy. I would say really around needs-based, meaning, someone has significant wealth tied up into their home, but they don't have other needs or they don't have other assets under management. Maybe they don't work with a financial advisor. Maybe they don't have assets under management with an advisor. And that mortgage is dominating what their cash flow is in retirement. And so, from a historical standpoint, it allowed them to take control of their retirement by creating, cash flow within their retirement picture. That was historically, when I stepped into the role and into the space, what it was used for. And it wasn't until I did several stints with, large financial institutions and consumer banking companies. And it was later in the 2000s, more like 2008, 2009, that I was introduced to a couple of other pioneers that were really focusing on introducing it into partnering with financial advisors and what the product could do when used with a want-based scenario versus a need-based scenario. And that really, again, filled my cup in terms of passions because, if it's used as a last resort strategy, does it work? Can it create successful outcomes and change the retirement picture? Yes, but you're only working with one bucket, one asset. But if used in conjunction with a bunch of different buckets, qualified accounts, non-qualified accounts, home equity, insurance, all of that in terms of a comprehensive picture is really where it creates phenomenal outcomes. And there's been a lot of research and studies that were going on during that time. I was fortunate enough to present to the FPA chapter of San Francisco, in downtown San Francisco. And I presented to them my story of my grandfather. So it was a highly emotional experience, sure. But it was awakening for me to understand that there were better solutions available even to him back then. And it was important for me to continue down that path.
So that is the literal epitome of hitting home, right?
Yeah. I think that if I look back, there are young professionals that are fortunate, even as a young age, and maybe Dr. Ben is one of those that is like, I'm going to be a doctor, and they go to college and they become a doctor, and they have known what they're going to be all along. I wasn't one of those, right? Mortgage was something that I found, and finance was something that I kind of turned to. But I was fortunate enough to find a way to align my passion with that. And so for me, as kind of a late bloomer, it's been fantastic for me to align my values and the things that I'm passionate about within my family with my professional life.
So, we've known each other now for going on, man, it's got to be well over 2 years now, right?
I think we're probably, it'll be 3 years in October, I think.
Wow, 3 years in October.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is you mentioned that you moved from Phoenix to California, right? From Arizona, anyway. I don't know if you said Phoenix. Maybe you did.
It's Tucson.
Tucson, okay. But from Arizona to California. And I never even knew that you lived in this area. Now, Tucson, that's obviously 2 hours south.
Here we go.
Anyway. But with that being said, still, I never knew that you had lived in Arizona at any time. And, we've known each other for almost 3 years.
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town, Benson, Arizona.
Oh yeah, I know it.
Yeah, so if anybody has ever driven on Interstate 10 east of Phoenix, maybe they're making their pilgrimage back east, maybe they're just going to Texas or whatever.
Truth or Consequences, New Mexico.
Yeah, if you do, you're going to go through a little town, Benson, but if you blink, you're going to miss it. It was a one stoplight town.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, my mom and dad were teachers at the school. That's a whole nother story to unpack, as having to go to school where your parents are teachers. But yeah, I mean, I grew up on a small little 10-acre land where my parents built their own house. I worked on a dairy when I was a teenager with one of my best friends. It was a family that I think they had 8 kids, and they had a dairy farm. And so I would work on the dairy farm with them, and it taught me at a young age what I did not want to do when I got older.
Sometimes that's a lesson, right? The things.
Yeah, it was the most difficult, dirty. I mean, it was, yeah. So from there, I kind of gravitated more towards the big city.
Big city of Tucson.
Yeah, right.
In comparison.
Big for me, right.
Wow, it's interesting. No wonder we've gotten along swimmingly over these few years. I mean, I was born and raised I was born in Little Rock, but I was really raised in a small city outside of Little Rock called Ward, which is a very, very small city. Then we moved to the bigger city called Cabot. And, just to give you an idea of how long ago that was and how sort of backwards thinking. I mean, I grew up in Arkansas, and it's sort of stereotypical, but Cabot, I'll never forget this. I mean, at the time I had no idea, but later on in life, I found out that I lived in a city that within the city limits, if you were black, you couldn't live in the city.
Whoa.
That's how
wow.
backwards thinking that it was, but how small town it also was, but how long ago that was, right? And again, I had no idea about, any of that stuff. And then eventually we moved to Jacksonville, which is a little bit bigger. It's where the Air Force Base is. And then we ended up moving to Little Rock. So, into that big city, so to speak. So, but, started from a very, very small town. And I remember I used to go with my grandmother, God rest her soul. We used to go to the dairy farm. When you said that, it brought flooding memories came back.
I don't want that to be our commonality, but
I know, but it's interesting. We only used to go there because we used to get our fresh raw milk from the dairy, right? We would go there, fill them up in the glass jars, and bring them home. I remember it like it was clockwork.
Well, there's a lot of disgusting behind the scenes stuff, not in terms of the quality of the milk. I'm not saying anything about that, but to manage bovine livestock like that is, whoo, yeah. And the smells, boy, I can tell you. You throw that Arizona summer heat into the mix.
Ooh, man.
But I do miss the monsoon. And I know for those of you in your area, in Phoenix, you understand what that means, right? 110-degree days, but then these thunderstorms come rolling in the afternoon almost every day. Yep. And you see them come in, and then they rain and they cool everything off. The smell of the creosote bushes is pretty pungent, and you can smell that. If you're fortunate enough, the lightning storms stay around the outskirts and decorate and light up the city at night. I miss that around the summers.
Well, it's interesting because it actually rained here today because we're right in the midst of our monsoon time of year. So it is nice. I mean, obviously we live in the desert, right?
Yeah,
it's called the desert for a reason, but when we get those monsoons and we get those, that type of activity, and the more active it is, it's got our humidity up this morning was like at 42%, which is off the charts high.
Right.
So it's kind of crazy. Dr. Ben, do you have any of those like dairy farm stories or out on the farm stories?
Unfortunately, no. I came in, when we came here to the States in 78, we moved into San Fernando Valley, which was predominantly still a little farmy. I don't have those recollections of just being out on the farm. And most of here, it's not really farming. It's all citrus and everything that came around us. But I mean, we did have farms, but not too many animals around here. You know, that was as close as, but I do get the stories of those. It's so interesting to see how our childhood has really set certain intention. Now we can look back and go, oh, these are some of the reasons why I'm doing or what I'm kind of attracted to, or I'm not attracted to based on how we grew up and our childhood experiences. I love hearing those stories about like where people grew up and where they get to now in their life, how they're like creating their work life experience around their childhood experiences.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, hey, Enrichers, we are coming up on a break, and we're going to take that quick break. But when we get back, we are going to catch up with what's going on with Geoffrey Wallace these days, now that he's off the farm and into the big city and in Northern California. We will be right back.
Estate planning. What does that even mean? When the inevitable happens for everyone on this planet, your estate plan kicks into action. But first, let's start with what an estate is. An estate is simply everything you own. Now, here's the issue and what needs to be understood when this event occurs. You only have two choices on this plan. Number one, either you plan how your estate gets handed out and distributed to those you leave behind. Or number two, your state decides who gets everything you own. For the first time ever, you can now take complete and total control of this plan that you've been deprived of for most of your life and generations before you. You can get personalized assistance along the way with a team of specialists whose job it is to make sure you have true peace of mind. It's important to understand that estate planning is a journey, and rest assured that our team will be available to you all along the way and at every step. Welcome to eState Plan, home of the last estate plan you'll ever need. To learn more, make sure to reach out to your local advisor licensed with us or go to our website for more information.
Hey, welcome back, Enrichers. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast. Previously, we were just talking a little bit about, moving up from the small town up to the big city, so to speak. And, we're joined again by Geoffrey Wallace of Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. And Geoffrey, maybe talk a little bit about how you and I got connected in that story and how you eventually landed at Mutual of Omaha Mortgage.
Yeah, so previously I worked at a company called Reverse Mortgage Funding, which was a phenomenal experience. I mean, I think I've taken something from any institution that I've worked at, but it was a real close-knit group that was doing great things in the industry, right? Kind of, I think any good companies are trying to act as stewards to assist that product to gain momentum for the entire industry. And make no mistake, RMF was a good group to do that. I worked for them for about 6 years, managing their Western states. And from that, in fact, I think you had one of my colleagues on, Christian Mills, on your Health and Wealth podcast.
I did. That's how we originally got connected.
And Christian is a great, great friend. And we aligned our passions around educating financial advisors on the product and introducing them to our sales teams. And so from that, then he introduced me to you. And, digital estate planning is such important and a program or service that is only going to increase in demand, right? As we look at, baby boomers, or peak 65 is what is kind of the coin phrase that we're using. So unfortunately, RMF, during this market turmoil of rates going up at a rate that was, not something that we're used to in the market. Sure, rates fluctuate, but not to the extent that they had in 2022. And due to that, the company was overexposed and had to shut its doors. At that point, I was back in the industry, kind of looking to see what was available. And during a time period of which is not really fortunate. I mean, being in lending, I think we're all kind of used to it being like an accordion, right? It expands, it contracts based upon rates and therefore overall market opportunity. I am fortunate enough within my mortgage career, and specifically around reverse mortgages, have developed some, long-standing relationships that I will have for the rest of my life. And the executive group here at Mutual of Omaha is one of those groups. And so I had been in discussions with them and took a little bit of time, and we were able to put together, I should say they were able to put together an opportunity that was a little bit unique and different for me, but at the same time leveraged my skill sets and allowed me to continue to also do what I'm passionate about, which is I'm a people person. I love the interaction. I go from the mantra that either you are growing or dying, right? Just like a plant in life. And for me, working with and interacting with people and educating them and learning from them also, whether it be a client sitting at the dinner table, whether it be a professional from a different industry, or whether it's mentoring producers within my field, all of that interaction, that drives me. And so the role that I have now is really helping Mutual of Omaha Mortgage develop external relationships. And that can be with any type of institution. A lot of it sticks within our core partners, which would be financial advisors, insurance agents, builders, real estate brokers, things like that. And that's kind of how you and I connected. And from there, it was, let's get started.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was really interesting. And, I've told the story to a few people that, we had this grand plan. You come out here, you're having your annual convention or whatever you want to call it at the Princess.
Yeah.
You to come here to get introduced to some of the loan officers that you work with. Everybody's here. I get the chance to meet the president. We're going to do this really big thing together, right? Yeah. Services company and reverse mortgage funding. And you knew that the need was there for the vast majority of your clients who, part of the application process, right, is do you have a trust, right? And then, of course, most of your loan officers that you've introduced me to, whenever they talk about that, they're like, oh, do you have a trust? No. The next question is, why don't you, right? It's such a critical piece of the equation, especially with what it is that you do.
Or power of attorney is equally. Power of attorney,
those simple, easy documents that everybody really should have, right? So anyway, we got really interconnected with that whole, shared vision of that connectivity. We worked within the same household. We worked within the same, educational, being a resource to advisors. And
yeah, you touched on it. It's educational, right? And it wasn't that we connected like, well, why don't, you could sell your product and we can sell ours. It wasn't about sell. It was truly about educate. And where we aligned was, it doesn't matter whether you have, millions of dollars of assets or you just own a home. Having a trust to be able to put the home in the trust, and I'm not trying to claim to be a financial advisor guru or anything, but just the basic building blocks and a power of attorney can save families so much grief and time and legal work when it comes to, either death of a family member and dispositioning those assets, or equally important when you get into cognitive issues. Yep. That power of attorney can protect those families. It was like we aligned emotionally from our client base from day one. The rest was the easier part. Yep. It was powerful when we first met.
Yeah. So we've got these grand plans, right? We went out, we played some golf together, we're meeting afterwards. And then literally it's like 2 weeks later, you fold. Reverse mortgage funding gone. It was like, not so much for that. It sounded like a great idea. I couldn't.
And I want to go back because when we played golf, I pooped the bed on the front nine, in my view. And then I came screaming back, and I think I shot an 81. And I was really excited about that, considering that was our first meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a lot of fun, right? You got a chance to
It's always nice to be able to kind of meet someone. Not that we're here to talk about golf, but I like golf.
We always bring golf into the fold here.
I mean, well, I like it because where can you spend 4.5 hours with someone and really get to know them? You don't, you're sitting in a cart with them or walking with them. You can't just talk about the weather, right? It's not superficial conversations. You get to really understand about their family, their upbringing. You also get to see them when they're mad
Yep.
and how they deal with adversity. So I think it's a wonderful game, especially from a standpoint of, really truly connecting with people.
Yeah, well, it's critical. And by the way, Enrichers, if you're listening, I mean, you probably, if you haven't taken golf up as a great way to cultivate relationships and build more of your business, that's a foundational approach that is instrumental and has been absolutely the most important aspect of my growth for sure, and what brought me to Arizona in the first place. So yeah, so golf is critically important. And to your point, and I've said this so many times, if you really want to know about a person, right, just play around a golf with them, because you're going to learn something about them real quick, right? So,
yeah, and people that play golf, it doesn't matter about your skill level. That's not what it's about. I think it's just each person is rooting the other person on. But again, you're faced with lots of different adversity and how you deal with that, right? Do you get down on yourself? Do you get mad and overly frustrated? Are you able to bounce back? Can you still stay in the moment with your partner or business person that you're meeting? And even though you're having a disastrous round, right, can you still engage and have a good time? Enjoy the fact that you're out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a great day. The weather was perfect. We enjoyed some cocktails afterwards. We got a chance to know each other a little bit more. And that's the other thing, right? Even after you're done, you go to the 19th hole, right? The famous 19th hole.
Yeah.
And then now you get a chance to, because you're really just scratching the surface when you're just getting to know somebody out on the golf course. Then you sit down at the 19th hole. Now you're really starting to unpack some other things and get in a little bit of a deeper dive on, how can we do some things? And that's where I got very excited about what the future was holding between Epic Services Company and our, completely digital end-to-end estate and legacy planning solution with reverse mortgage funding. And then, right?
Yeah, RMF gone overnight.
I mean,
it was fast. It was very fast.
I mean, like that fast. Like I was like, what just happened? I have no idea. Because I remember meeting the president, and again, it's a princess, right? And
yeah, I mean, I literally, my boss at the time came to me. It was like the beginning of the week, and we're like, okay, there's some issues. And we could see that there were some issues around being able to fund loans. And I don't want to get into too much of the details, but in a leadership role, there are certain fundamentals that if things happen, you're kind of like, hold on a second, this is not.
Yeah.
So my boss and I stayed pretty close. And then I remember Saturday morning, he called me. He's like, it's not good. And I literally went into my office. I put the headset on. I told my kids, don't bother me. I've got to make a lot of calls. And I went through making phone calls to my entire team. So we're talking, I think there's probably 55, 60 people.
Wow.
Over the weekend. And I care about each of these people. And, again, this is a rising interest rate environment. The market is shrinking. It is not the time that as a mortgage professional, you want to be out on the street, because at that time, the forward business had already kind of been shriveling up. And so many of them were, deciding, do I stay in mortgage? What do I do? I just felt an incredible level of responsibility and care for my group. So I wasn't going to worry about myself. I started getting calls from outside companies. And I'm like, I got to find a home for my people. So I spent all weekend letting them know what was going on, what we're going to do. Some, it was like I had to leave a message, which that's not the kind of news you want to leave via voicemail. And then I remember coming up for air like Sunday at like 7 p.m. A few other people that, some people called back and I was able to connect with them, but a few that I wasn't, but at least I had a message into them. And I came out of my office and my daughters were looking at me like I must have aged 5 years over that weekend just going through that. But it was a really good exercise for me in terms of staying the course, like trying to, I told all those people, listen, I will help you evaluate the different opportunities that are out there. I will see if I can, put together some potentials and we can have some open discussions. Companies contacting me about what I'm going to do. And I said, ultimately, I'm not trying to herd them into one spot. Each person's going to have to make a decision that's right for them as an individual and right for them as their family. We've got a sales force that's all over the board. We have young professionals out of college. We have people that maybe this is their second or third career, but they're still extremely passionate about it. So when you've got that kind of dynamic going on, the decision is different for each person.
Sure.
And so I aligned several companies, and we did some, big, massive Zoom calls so that they can talk about it. Then afterwards, many of them would come to me individually and want to talk about the pros and cons of each, and we would go through it. And I think that one, not focusing on myself allowed me not to kind of get into a feeling of what am I going to do? I was so myopically focused on them that it helped. It helped me get through that time period to where I was able to kind of exhale, decompress. And I had done so much evaluation, really look at where I think the market was going. Where are the good players? Where do I want to be? And again, as I said, I was very fortunate enough to know the leadership here at Mutual that it was just the perfect fit.
So let's get into the partnership and sort of like the amount of time that it took from now that quick story, speaking of being at the golf course, I remember during your transition, you called me and you're like, hey, I've landed on my feet. I still think there's some things we can do together. Let me get more intertwined with where I'm at. And then I'm going to reach back out to you here in the not too distant future. Right. So I had no clue where you landed, right? I had no clue where you're at. And then Dr. Ben, he calls me up and he goes, hey, so I'm at Mutual of Omaha Mortgage, and I think we can do the same type of thing. I want to introduce you to some of the leadership team here. Chris Karagakos is who you ultimately introduced me to. And so we started the process, the vetting process, the whatever it is that Mutual of Omaha had to be comfortable with, which took, man, it felt like it took forever, right, Geoffrey?
Yeah.
To approve us as a vendor, as you can imagine, right, a huge company like that, it's going to take a while for you to become an approved vendor. And it did. It took quite some time for us to be able to do that. So do you remember how some of those?
So I would say, if it was a small mortgage brokerage shop, right, they have so much more autonomy and flexibility to navigate. They're typically dealing with, only having to worry about the rules and regulations and the governance of that state versus a multi-state organization, Fortune 300 company, 120-year-old brand. When you get into an organization that is that large, that also has lots of different silos of products, every company that size has to go through a vendor approval. But, ours, no disdain towards the process. It's something that you have to go through. So even though you and I understood the significance that it would play and how easy we could have a very symbiotic relationship, and we can shake hands on that, and Chris was right along with it. Yep. There was so much behind the scenes in terms of just the organization vetting and trying to understand, what is taking place? Is there sharing of customer information? And we're like, no, it's more of a strategic alliance. So there was a lot of back and forth around that to get to that point to where we could finally say, yes, we have an alliance.
Yeah. And then finally
we've united the clans.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a big press release and the whole thing. And maybe in the show notes, we'll put that press release in there again. And then from there, eventually, you started introducing me to more of the loan officers all over the country. And, we're very excited about, we had a soft launch, a little bit of a beta program. Well, actually, why don't you share with me a little bit more and with the enrichers on what was taking place while Epic Services Company was going through the vetting process? to become a vendor partner in a strategic alliance.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening with Mutual of Omaha and Keller Williams Mortgage?
Yeah, so at that point, there were discussions for Mutual to acquire Keller Mortgage. And obviously imagine the vetting that was going on for that, right?
Yeah.
There's so much more that, we were not even aware of, because there are behind the scenes discussions. There is non-disclosed due diligence even before, right, the teams understand what's happening. But fast forward through all of that, we acquired Keller Mortgage, and it has allowed us become better partners with the brokerage side. I would just, from a basic standpoint, we're talking about the realtor base.
Sure.
And now we are working on the synergies between those two organizations. And what's interesting is, and I think it's such a good example or barometer to our relationship, because as much as we know it makes sense, and we're grounded in education, and we're focused on really the same client, it's one thing to say, yeah, this is nice and simple. It's another to go out and try to communicate to everyone else what that value is and how we can best work together. And I would say we're still figuring that out, but we're beginning to make introductions that really spotlight the synergies between us. And it will be interesting to see over, I would say, the coming 18 to 24 months as we expect rates to begin to come down, and then the market to start to go more into, when I say market, I'm talking about mortgages, go back into an expansionary role or cycle. It will be interesting to see as we develop these new synergies and strategies how we grow together.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and we're excited about the pilot program. It's actually next week. We launched the campaign to start having registrants register there in the Salt Lake City area. Shout out to Molly Forbush, who connected us with the Keller Williams deal on the brokerage side of the equation, and we have full buy-in once we had that soft launch from those realtors, and they recognized that our educational platform was very robust, very comprehensive, outside of what they had ever really even understood when it came to, the industry jargon, legacy planning, right? Then they saw just how unique our platform was, and it's digital and all that, cool stuff. But a week and a half away, and we're up over almost 60 registrants already. And what that tells us, and we know this because we do it all over the country, right? Just now where people that are connected with Mutual of Omaha and Epic Services and Keller Williams, and that triumvirate, if you will, that synergistic collaborative goal and objective there, we know it's going to be successful because in how much people are yearning to get this type of information, especially the very underserved, what we call mass affluent demographic.
Right.
Which make up really the same households that we tend to work with, right? Because we know that through almost 10 years of doing this and educating, enlightening, and empowering, right, Dr. Ben, the 3 E's, as we call it, we know that a lot of times the general public or the mass affluent demographic that's very underserved in this area of expertise, they are blown away when they recognize, well, wait a second, I need this too. I just thought I had to be a multimillionaire to have an estate plan. And in most instances, they need this way more than the ultra high net worth clients need it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, and the problem, I think, is one, you have the fact that they think it is for the mass affluent, but the challenge is in reaching them, right? You can't just do a basic outreach. And I think what is unique about our affiliation is that we are bringing value to those institutions. So in this case, we're partnering with Keller Williams, and we're being able to leverage their sphere of influence by providing educational services. And that is why I think the clients are more responsive. In other words, they have a relationship with their realtor or their broker, and they're now providing this free educational piece. And so it's that connection that is really kind of creating the synergies of what I think are the building blocks going forward. It's one thing just to say, hey, we have a partner that offers this. It's another when you look in your book of business, and it doesn't matter what your business is, but you look in your sphere of influence and you say, hey, I do have a value add for you that I think is going to be interesting for your family. Would you like to come to this event? And doing it through other partners, I think is what creates the better push.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're very excited about it. It's going to be, next week and the week after that. It's over a 2-week period. We've got 4 different events that a lot of the people are going to be coming and learning about, again, that educational aspect of it. So, we are coming up against the clock. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a break. But when we get back, we are going to flip the script a little bit. We're going to get Dr. Ben in here talking with Geoffrey Wallace of Mutual of Omaha Mortgage and talking a little bit about health. We'll be right back.
You want the absolute best for yourself, and you want it to be easy. That's why we created Green 85. It helps with detoxifying the body gently. We're proud it's chemical-free, unlike almost all other supplements you'll find. Bottom line, Green 85 will get you healthier. We look forward to hearing what Green 85 did for you.
To get this product and our other amazing products, go to chemicalfreebody.com. That's chemicalfreebody.com.
Hey, welcome back, Enrichers. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast Show. We have been on here speaking with Geoffrey Wallace of Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. Geoffrey, thank you so much for sharing your backstory and then talking a little bit about how our aligned synergies are really trying to help the mass affluent that are out there, that very underserved area in both reverse mortgages and, wealth management and estate and legacy plan and everything. But this is the part where we're going to flip the script a little bit. And Dr. Ben, we're going to bring you in on here. And maybe you want to tee something up that I think you were interested in talking a little bit more about, some of those end-of-life healthcare things that can happen from time to time based upon Geoffrey Wallace's story about his grandparents.
Yes. So it hits really home, Geoffrey, because I've been doing a lot of work and research around neurodegeneration.
Wow. Okay.
So as a chiropractor, I know most people think about back and neck, but my practice, my scope, and the work that I do is way deeper. And I can see the trend of this coming into the future. I know you and both of you in your field can see the future of where things are going. And I see a very big trend of neurodegenerative issues that are going to be coming up as more people are dealing with these, and younger people are starting to deal with these. And so when it comes to wealth management and having this, how have you experienced this in your career as far as, and again, I'm not of your world. I like being here because I've heard of reverse mortgages. I don't know how people really use them and how they're utilized successfully. But towards people that might be not really capable and not being able to fund a lot of their health issues, how would this come into play for them?
Yeah, so there's a lot to say around that. I'll try to see if I can stick to certain aspects of it. First and foremost, I think when you mention reverse mortgage, there's like this stigma around it.
Yes, I hear about it a lot.
Yeah, when in reality, it is a mortgage, just like any other mortgage. It just has unique features. Among those features is it has flexibility in payment. And, just like any other mortgage, you have to pay property taxes and insurance, right? Which is essentially paying the local taxes and then insuring the collateral of the property. No different than any other mortgage. So those are the basic requirements. But it is that flexibility in payment that we really zero in on when we are educating the masses and working with the affluent and their financial advisors to create long-term solutions. And really what I think you're kind of referring to is there's 4 L's in retirement, but longevity is an issue, right? People are living longer. And another one of those L's is liquidity, right? So how do you create long-term cash flow solutions when you're solving for, one, an unknown amount of time, but that time is typically extending as people live longer? If you factor in the percentages of those that will experience a long-term care event, I think that's in the range of around 70%.
Yep.
And the costs of that long-term care event continuing to go up. The long-term care insurance industry is, extremely stressed. And the premiums that you pay or that someone that's getting a policy, there's kind of a sweet spot of when you need to try to get in, right, in your early 50s. But then the problem comes into those premiums can expand over time. What happens if you get into a point where you are now 68 and those premiums are too much for you? Do you walk away from a plan that you've been paying into for, 15 years or 12 years? And then how do you create a solution to stress test your overall portfolio for this long-term care event? That was a lot that I kind of unpacked from there, but those are really kind of the solutions that we try to model for our partners. And really, it's about saying it is just a tool for you to leverage home equity to create an additional bucket that you can look at to solve for long-term care. We're not talking about taking out this reverse mortgage and having access to equity and immediately using it.
Yep.
That would be more of a last resort strategy, which can work, but we can create more successful outcomes by when you turn 62, opening that reverse mortgage and creating this line of credit. One of the unique features of it is it grows over time if unused. So if you take it out at 62, age 72 or 75, that line of credit, that bucket that has now grown significantly and can now create interesting solutions for someone that may experience a long-term care event.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That helps me.
Yeah.
Again, I'm learning a lot just listening. So the last couple of interviews, I've learned tremendous amounts of information. So this is a brand new world. It's not my lane that I usually hang out in. So listening to all these terms and all these things that are coming out have just been really interesting. Anything I can help you with or any questions you have pertaining even the neurodegenerated issues or health issues or wellness issues.
When you mentioned that, the first thing that came to my mind is, isn't there a lot of studies coming out about, just the swiping of feeds and how people can just sit there for hours swiping through stuff that the dopamine, this is kind of a strange topic, but the dopamine levels that it is releasing, but you're not expanding your thinking. You're not creating any new neural pathways as you are learning more things. You're just stimulating your mind instantaneous. Is that a massive threat to our long-term neurological? Isn't that compounding the issue of how many people could experience dementia and things of that nature?
I got a lot to say about this.
I love it.
You guys, when you see me, I got excited about this. I call it TikTok brain. All right.
Okay.
I had to come up with a term because I'm starting to see issues, right? Back in, when I started in 1999, I had some issues and I could get certain people well. The next realm of difficulty. So when I was hanging out with my doctors, they started practicing in the 60s and they're like, hey man, we got people well in days. And then over time, it took weeks. And they said with the add-on to computers and sitting and all of these things, the healing process has taken so much longer. I noticed that with iPhones, right? So in 2008, when iPhones first came out, I started seeing the effects of that by the 2011, 2012.
When you say effects, there are the physical effects, right? Of
Physical,
those people just sitting there with their neck and their,
that
right.
was the first thing. And I'm
Got
seeing
it.
more and more, and I'm seeing all these kids that grew up with iPads getting there. So now the next thing is my term TikTok brain. Okay. And so your brain could only process a certain amount of information. You know, you ever listen to Jeff Bezos, I only make 3 decisions a day, right? And it's just, you know, our quantum wiring for our brain for most of us is very limited. So the constant flipping is doing 3 things. It's bending time. A lot of us are noticing, why is the year going by so fast? You might ask that question. It's like, why does time feel like it's moving? Well, we're used to regular. Your brain is just used to regular daily life experiences. Now we're having experiences. We're living other people's experiences every 30 seconds, right? So it is just speeding up the neurons and the neurosynapses in your brain, and they're just kind of like, and what it is all, you know, it's all predominantly, yes, we learned something, or TikTok made me do it, or whatever it is. But for a lot of us, it's a lot of fear and worry. It's constant, like negative, you know, stuff. So this is warping our brain for sure. Without a doubt, it's creating fogginess, memory loss, eye issues. All of these things are definitely being affected. Now, I don't know to the level of neurodegenerative issues. I think there's other things like, you know, the conversation came up the other day about, smoking in the 40s and 50s. We didn't realize the issues for that for decades, and, you know, almost a century later. And they're like, what do you think is going to be the next smoking issue? And my thing is cell phones, like, you know, to cigarettes. We'll find out in about 50 to 80 years what these guys have done to us. Like,
the long-term effects.
Yeah. Holding your phone, wireless earbuds, all of those things, because that's what I study. It's like, how does waves affect neurons, right? So I think it's going to be definitely the swiping through. It's accelerating anxiety. I've never seen so many 20-year-olds under anxiety medication. Yeah. And I just have one thing to kind of like direct that to, and that's just the social media aspect of the brain warp that they're getting. Yeah. And the dopamine and the anxiety that it is a hit, and it's also creating negative aspects of that. So it's just doing so much. I could probably run a whole weekend conference on the actual cellular level damage, cognitive damage that it's doing. And it's unfortunately, for now, it's unreversible. You know, the only way to really start correcting it is to get rid of all of that. But powerful as podcasts are, our brain's wavelength and our ability to really conduct information, moving at that speed, doing it for half hour. You know, people are doing some kind of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn. They're moving so fast on data. It's really warping their brain. It's changing.
You had mentioned something that hits a nerve with me. So anyone that I know and knows me, I have 2 young daughters. They're teenagers now, 13 and 17. And I'm very involved with them. I'm very passionate about being involved with them. But at the same time, they have their cell phone and they watch stuff. I would say probably about 3 or 4 years ago is when I noticed with my eldest, she would talk like she knew stuff. And it didn't take me long to realize it was almost like you had said something that people are seeing other people's experiences, like online through these feeds. And for her, she would act and talk like she knew about something, but she'd never experienced it. And it was alarming to me in the sense of I had to really be involved and be proactive by saying, watching something on there is not the same as experiencing it. And it wasn't until we were able to travel with her, outside of the country with bigger experiences in other cultures, that it really became more profound to her about the world around her and what's available to her and the excitement of all of that, but also understanding how small the world is and how humble it is to be in a foreign country when, you don't speak the language and you're the outsider. And I think that's a good experience. But going back to the topic, I couldn't believe I was I think teenagers think they know it all anyways, but you factor in seeing it all on your phone, boy, they really think they know it all.
Yep. And,
wow.
This goes to the level of what we've seen on, and nothing political, but what we've seen on campuses over the last summer and things like that. It's social media, and social media can move things into really great places. And it could also distort what you said, reality for a lot of people, adults too, not just kids, not just teenagers and the young adults, even as adults. And we see that show up in many ways with people and how they're experiencing their experience, which I call it. And so
the political discourse, right? I think it gives you so much access to the blue and the red and the discourse between the two parties that probably does create anxieties and anger. And
I was listening to something earlier too, and it was about, the younger people in their 20s, most of them don't see the ability, I guess it's being put out there, like the American dream of owning a home and this and that. They already understand that for most of them, that might not happen. That might not be a possibility.
Yeah.
Their $30, $40, $50 an hour job will not even get them close to a down payment now.
Right.
And so, and then this information gets out there, and you're in this echo chamber of all these kids talking the same things, and they're creating stress within themselves. And again, there's a lot of positive out there too, but for the most part, the negative information seems to hit harder than all the inspiring and powerful things that are out there that could be utilized. So I do see it causing issues. I do see it causing severe anxiety, even in adults. I'm not picking on young kids. I see it as adults losing hope, all of these things. It's a powerful tool. And I believe, looking into my hourglass in the future of how it's going to control things, it's very challenging, and it's going to have you're going to see a lot of issues, mental health issues, and then this is going to accelerate. So what we had dementias in the 90s and the 80s, we're seeing in the 70s and the 60s dripping into people in their 50s. And so it's like, wow, man, this is no joke. Something is happening.
Yeah. Can I switch gears on your other specialty?
Sure.
So I started playing pickleball.
Yeah. Talk to me, Gus.
You gotta
That's its own type of cult following, but we don't need to get into that. But
you have to, before I forget, you have to look at the Epic Services Company Instagram story.
Okay.
It's literally about how people who play pickleball in like ball, stick, hand-eye, racket sports live longer.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I'm glad we shifted gears to something a little bit more positive.
Yeah.
So I picked it up, I think it would be October of last year. So I haven't played it but a year, but it is highly addictive. And based upon your, I have heard and seen articles quickly about the rise of pickleball injuries and things like that. What would you say from a chiropractic background in regards to pickleball of maybe, how many times would be good for someone that plays consistently to get an adjustment from their local chiropractor?
I run a wellness practice. So most of my wellness patients are once a week, once every other week. Kids, family, okay. I see the whole family.
Yeah.
So we run a wellness practice. So we have lifetime clientele. That's what we promote. So depending on your level of activity, now I have golfers. I have 2 of the top 10 golfers in our practice. And they know, like, hey, I'm going to compete. All right, come in here. I do full body stuff, workout.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be active on a weekly basis and you sit behind a computer a lot and you have all of these things, because my thing is like, hey, how do you go from sitting for 6 to 8 hours a day to being super fully active, and not without injuries? We teach those classes. Right. So I think as long as you're getting checked regularly, again, once a week or twice a month, you're going to be really, really safe. My strategy for all of my top athletes is do not stretch before you play. That's my thing. I'm not a big stretch guy because I know what it does to the muscle spindles. I say, hey, warm up, old school calisthenics, jumping jacks, warming up, warm the tissue up. The stretching is post, cool down stretches, right? So if you want to avoid injury, don't go in there stretching all the muscles, hamstrings back. Warm things up, get them moving, especially if you've been sitting all day behind your desk and you got a pickleball game at 5, 6, 7 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Just, it's warm up. And I've done this from football players to basketball players to golfers, everybody that I trained. And it's made a huge, we've been at 0 injuries due to the game. So that's awesome. That's my takeaway. If you can, that's what you're going to save yourself, save your joints. Even in golf, I see everybody stretching themselves. Mm-hmm. Those are the guys that always pull a glute, hamstring, calf. The best thing to do is just warm up, just keep moving, get the blood flowing, and you always succeed.
Love that. That's great advice. That's great.
You got it. All right. Any other big hits?
Yeah, Geoffrey, do you have anything else for Dr. Ben?
No, I don't, but I really love the nugget he gave here at the end of the conversation, though. That's valuable to me.
Yeah, and just enjoy, man. Keep moving. Keep your athleticism. And whether it's golf, I love pickleball, tennis, hand-eye coordination stuff keeps your brain sharp. So these types of things, if people could just stay active in their life, these are the things that really stimulate the neurons in the brain and really keep you active and functioning the old tribal way.
Nice way to close out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
That is fantastic. We always want to end on a high note, positive, right? Because positive can also be infectious. It's okay.
Yes.
Infectious on a positive level, right? So, hey, Enrichers, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast Show. To be able to see all of our previous guests, like Geoffrey Wallace of Mutual of Omaha, edit that out, Mutual of Omaha Reverse Mortgage, go to our website at www.thehealthandwealthpodcastshow.com and make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, whatever the case may be. So for my esteemed host, my new co-host, Dr. Ben, I am Carter Wilcoxson of CSI Financial Group, an Epic Services company, wishing you all a great day. Geoffrey Wallace, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Appreciate you being here.
We'll be able to have you on and for our backstory and your backstory to be able to share with all the enrichers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I didn't even have to worry about violating any HIPAA rules. So
there you go.
Right. All the best.
So until next time, enrichers, we will see you on the Health and Wealth Podcast. Thanks, everybody. Hey, enrichers. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Wilcoxson.
And I'm your host, Tim James. And by God, we are committed to helping you guys have fat wallets, flat bellies. So tune in again for another episode and make sure to like, share, and drink a lot of water.
Or beer.
You have just listened to the Health and Wealth Podcast with Carter and Tim.